Okay. Thank you all for being here today. Let me introduce who we have with us today. Starting at my left, we have June Rubin, who's from the Moms Demand Action organization, which has been very effective, and we thank her very much for being here. We have Ramon Contreras, who's the co-founder and the president of the Youth Over Guns. We have Alex Clavering from the New York City March for Our Lives. We have Rebecca Fisher, who's the executive director of New Yorkers Against Gun Violence. We have my counsel, Alfonso David. We have me, governor of the state of New York. Ayala Eastman, thank you very much for being here again. It's always a pleasure to be with you from the Marjorie Stoneman High School. She's a student, and her message has been very powerful, and she's been a powerful spokesperson all across the country. Randy Weingarten, who needs no introduction. She's the president of the American Federation of Teachers. We thank her very much for being here, and we thank her for her leadership on this issue all across the country. Andy Pallotta, the president of New York State United Teachers Association. Michael Mulgrew is the president of the United Federation of Teachers. Mark Cannizzaro, president of the Council of School Supervisors and Administrators. And we have David Pacino, who is from the Giffords Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence. Obviously, the issue today is about guns and gun violence. We're 22 weeks into 2018. There's been 23 school shootings in 22 weeks. Just think about that. It's become a chronic problem, a problem that is all across this country, and the frequency and regularity is truly disturbing. Parkland, Florida, 17 innocents were killed. It was an eye-opener for this country, not that it was a case of first impression, because we've had a series of violent activities. But Parkland sparked an outrage where at one point people say enough is enough, and Parkland, Florida did that. Parkland, Florida, I think also the activism of the students and young people who really rose up and made their voice heard was a powerful message all across this country. There was a shooting in Santa Fe, Texas, just a couple of weeks ago. And one of the high school students, a young woman, was interviewed on TV, and I was watching the interview, and she said, well, were you surprised when it was your school? And she said, no, because it's now happening everywhere. And I was so taken by that comment. No, I'm not surprised. It happens everywhere. That is an entirely new reality. I am very old, but it is a bizarre, frightening concept for me to be thinking about the possibility of a school shooting. It just didn't happen. This is a new and frightening phenomenon. Well, why doesn't the nation do something about it? The easy answer is the NRA, and the NRA is a very powerful political force, but frankly, it's more than the NRA. It's the politics of the issue in general. When you talk about guns, it's a politically polarizing issue, and politicians tend to stay away from issues that are controversial. And I can tell you the issue of guns is controversial. It's controversial here in the state of New York, where we have upstate and downstate. We have rural communities, urban communities, and we know firsthand how politically difficult this issue is. But the lesson of New York is just because it's difficult doesn't mean the political system and governmental system should avoid it. We acted after Sandy Hook in Connecticut, which was a school shooting very close to New York. And people in New York said enough is enough at that point. We passed a law called the SAFE Act. The SAFE Act was passed 5 years ago. It does everything that we are still trying to get done nationally. SAFE Act banned military-style assault weapons, limited magazines to 10 bullets, set up a mental health database, which now has 77,000 people on it. 77,000 names on the mental health database. These are people who could have bought a gun the day before the SAFE Act was passed, who now can't buy a gun because they're on a mental health database. 77,000. It closed the gun show loophole. What it didn't do is also important. 5 years ago, we passed a law. Hunters still have their guns. Legal owners still have their guns. There was no NRA slippery slope horror story of what was going to happen. So the SAFE Act shows what's possible, and it also shows how specious the opponent's argument actually is. We want to take the next step now in New York. Continue to make New York safer and continue to show this country that we can do something. And we want to pass what's called a red flag bill. Red flag bill would provide a safety valve for people who are mentally ill, who may be in possession of a gun and may harm themselves or others. And what the red flag bill says is a police officer can petition a judge upon information and belief that a person is a danger to themselves or others and is in possession of a gun. The red flag bill says a family member or a member of the household can petition a judge and say, this family member, this member of the household, we believe could be a danger to themselves or others, and is in a possession of a gun, and the judge could take the guns from that person for a period of time until that person is in a position where they can possess a firearm. Our red flag bill would also allow a teacher or a principal, a school official, a superintendent to also petition a judge and say, we have a person in the school, we believe they're dangerous, we believe they may be in possession of a firearm, and ask a judge to intervene. We think that is the logical, sensible, intelligent way forward in this situation. The president has said the answer is to give teachers guns. To me, that is a bizarre concept. Teachers are not there to carry firearms and engage in shootouts in a school setting with hundreds of students in the venue. You don't become a school teacher to become a security guard or a police officer. You become a teacher to be an educator. You're not supposed to carry guns. You're carrying books. You're carrying material. You're not there to carry a gun. The president's answer is always the same. The answer to gun violence is more guns, right? That's also the NRA's answer. Why? Because they represent the industry. So the more guns they sell, the better for the industry. That makes absolutely no sense to us. But a teacher should have recourse. We're also talking about teacher safety here. And right now, you have the teachers in a situation where there's nothing they can do. And it's frightening. We'll hear more from Randy and Andy and Mike on it. But I have teachers coming up to me saying, I'm frightened by the situation. And the president's suggestion is outrageous. I don't have a gun. I don't want to have a gun. I don't want to learn how to shoot a gun. And I don't want to have to worry about being a security officer when I'm there to educate students. But they should have a recourse. And this is the intelligent way. If they have information, they sense that a student may be a danger, they should have something to do. And this bill will give them that right. This bill, if it passes, would be the first bill in the United States of America to give a teacher this recourse and this solution, where a teacher would have the right to go to court directly or go to a superintendent or a supervisor and let them petition the judge. And then due process is also provided for because the judge would make the determination. But it would be another step forward, a major step forward, and it would be New York once again leading the way to do something intelligent and smart and progressive on the issue. And that's the bill that we're going to propose. With that, let me turn it over to Ayala Eastman, who has been such an inspiration to so many. She's been a powerful voice, as I said, all across the country, but she's also been a powerful voice in New York. And it's hard to be a powerful voice in New York because they don't like to listen in New York. You know, they talk more than they listen in New York. But they listen to you. Please.
Thank you, Governor. My name is Alea Eastman, a rising senior at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. On February 14th, we experienced a life-changing tragedy resulting in 17 lives being taken away from us. I was in room 1214, the third classroom that the shooter shot into, where we lost Helena Ramsey and Nicholas Dorette. Nicholas Dorette saved my life. No student should have to hide underneath her deceased classmate's body to survive, but I was that student. School shootings are not the only form of gun violence. I lost my uncle in Brooklyn 15 years ago to gun violence, and gun violence all around, whether it's in schools or on the streets, needs to be eradicated, and we need proper politicians to help us get that done. On Saturday, we marched across the Brooklyn Bridge to highlight gun violence in urban communities. Here in New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo has already taken action to show true leadership. In 2018, he signed the most ambitious gun safety reform into law that this country has ever seen. The governor then took New York's efforts further this year when he signed into law legislation that removes guns from domestic abusers. I was proud to stand with him on that day, and I am proud to stand with him today to continue to strengthen gun laws in New York. With these new actions, Governor Cuomo is showing that New York is listening and New York will lead the way. It's time for our leaders in Washington to follow New York's lead and learn from our past and make positive change to ensure a stronger, brighter future for the next generations. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Well done, as usual.
Thank
you. Next, we'll turn it over to Randy Weingarten, President of the AFT.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you, Ayala. The Governor's already said it, and I'm very pleased that I am here with our local and state schools people, Michael and Andy and the CSA, because what's self-evident to us seems not to be self-evident to the world, which is we need to do everything to keep our schools as safe sanctuaries for children or young adults and for educators. And the governor's already described it, but what the governor is doing in this proposal is providing a meaningful step forward to do that for people who actually know our students the best, for them to be able to raise a red flag when someone shows a real sign of threat. Now, AFT represents the educators in Broward, and I have been in Broward several times at Stoneman, at Westglades Middle School, and what teachers and other educators have said to me often is that the shooter showed signs that he was a troubled soul. In fact, according to the Brady campaign, 42% of mass shooters exhibit warning signs before committing these heinous crimes. So the law, the proposal that the governor is making today would empower educators and school staff, along with families, along with law enforcement, to act and be heard when there is this level of trouble, while at the same time ensuring the students' due process rights, because it's the judge that makes those decisions. This is the kind of tool that we need as part of a multifaceted approach to address America's gun violence epidemic, and it is an epidemic. So yes, we need the common sense gun legislation, and yes, we need mental health services and wraparound services, and we also need to make sure our schools don't become armed fortresses, and the governor is quite right. Teachers do not want to be armed with guns. They want to be armed with supplies, with books, with guidance counselors, with nurses, with resources, but they don't want to be armed with guns. And anyone who understands schools understands the insanity of arming teachers. It may create an illusion of safety, but in reality, it will make a school more dangerous. So this is the kind of common sense proposal that will actually help schools and help teachers and help kids. And let me end by saying this. When a nation loses more students to gun violence in a year than service members in combat, it's time to act. When young people say that their greatest fear is gun violence, it's time to act. When students and teachers across the country speak about school shootings in terms of when it will happen, not if it will happen, it's time to act. Thankfully, with this legislation, Governor Cuomo is saying it's time to value children, students, our schools, and our educators more than the NRA. And that is why I am proud, on behalf of our 1.7 million members, to be here today supporting this action.
Very well said, very powerful. Last, we'll hear from Rebecca Fisher, who's the Executive Director of New Yorkers Against Gun Violence. We thank her very much for her advocacy and her organization. I think people are getting it. I think people are mobilized. I think they're energized. And the New Yorkers Against Gun Violence has been a great engine in that movement. So thank you, Rebecca Fisher.
Thank you, Governor Cuomo, and thank you, Randy and Alea, as well. On behalf of New Yorkers Against Gun Violence, I want to thank Governor Cuomo for listening to our concerns and for taking action that will save lives today. You don't just listen, you get it done. The governor has led the way with the strongest gun safety legislation in the country, the New York SAFE Act. And this year, we passed legislation to remove guns from domestic abusers. And we're working together now to extend the background check waiting period from 3 to 10 days. Today, Governor Cuomo is taking this state even further. Thank you for your leadership. The Extreme Risk Protection Order legislation, which has been our top priority this session, also called a red flag bill, is a critical step forward that will save lives. The vast majority of mass shooters and people who commit suicide show signs of their intentions before they commit a fatal act. But our current law renders families and teachers, who are often the first to see these signs, unable to take necessary action to save their loved ones and our communities. This legislation will provide a path forward for them to receive the help and intervention that they need. Today, more than ever, it is clear that we need to strengthen our gun laws and ensure that dangerous weapons don't end up in the wrong hands for our families and for our young people, like Alea. I'm proud to live in a state that is at the forefront of this fight against gun violence, and we're grateful for the leadership of the governor and also the leadership of the champions in our legislature that we've worked hard with, like State Senator Brian Kavanaugh. I look forward to working with the governor and the legislature to get these bills passed without delay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.